Hey everybody, I'm forward meteorologist Paul Hagen here in the Weather Center, and now that the snow has fallen and been packed down into ice on area roads and is in fact in the process of melting across most of the mid-state today, it's time to take a look back and kind of unpack exactly what went right with the forecast last week and what went pretty wrong with the forecast. And obviously Nashville got much more snow than anticipated. Other parts of the mid-state got about what was expected, but the whole pattern rearranged itself a little bit. So different meteorologists have a different ways, few different ways of actually dealing with these forecasts that go awry. One way is just kind of kick dirt on it and pretend it never existed in the first place and never talk about it again. I don't think that's very helpful. Doesn't provide very many learning opportunities. Another way to deal with it is just to wallow in it and just say, oh, I got this wrong and never going to get anything right ever again. Also not tremendously helpful. I prefer to look back and kind of reevaluate the information that was available leading up to the storm and evaluate how well we reacted to it along the way. Let's take a look. First of all, this is the map I posted on Friday morning, before the changeover to snow actually occurred. It did occur quite a bit faster than anticipated, and this is what I expected at that point. This was an increase over previous forecasts, and we'll come back to that, but this was kind of the final version of the snowfall forecast. And here's what actually happened. These are the snowfall amounts collected by the National Weather Service, and you can see that those amounts are quite a bit different. Heavier amounts in northern Middle Tennessee, lower amounts in southwestern Middle Tennessee. So the gradient is what we expected and how sharp that gradient would be from a quarter inch in Wayne County to a foot of snow in northeastern Middle Tennessee, even more than that. But the exact placement of that gradient between the higher amounts did change, and some of the locations of the heavier amounts did change quite a bit as well. So let's reset and go back to how things looked about 24 hours beforehand, Thursday morning when we were evaluating, and I had the blog post. Excuse me. Kind of fighting off losing a voice here, but I'm not going to re-record this because that doesn't help the voice either. This is the RPM model's output for snowfall potential as of Thursday morning. It was looking at the next 48 hours, and you can see it had heavy snow in northwestern Middle Tennessee, the western half of southern Kentucky, but nothing. That first shade of blue there, that kind of grayish blue, indicates less than a half an inch of accumulation, and that's what the computer models were anticipating for Nashville. This particular one, others were saying other stuff, as I'll get to, but this is one that usually once you're within about 24 hours of an event, has a pretty good handle on things. So everything, as I recorded the blog post on Thursday morning, was trending in the direction that pushed the higher accumulations farther to the northwest. The North American model showed a similar pattern, but some slightly higher amounts for Nashville in particular, with about 2 inches of accumulation, those higher amounts farther to the northwest. So the two most reliable models that had been accurately predicting how previous events had played out were both pointing towards a northward shift to the heavier accumulations. And very, infamously now I said, well, I wouldn't be surprised if Nashville got less than an inch, but I stuck with this for a forecast. This was as of Thursday morning, said an inch or two in Nashville with the higher amounts farther to the northwest. There were revisions along the way, but the problem was Thursday morning, part of this is just bad luck as well, that the most northward shift to the accumulation pattern that the models were indicating, the farther it shifted north was exactly when I recorded that blog post on Thursday morning, and then later in the day things started to trend back towards bringing heavier accumulations, and I had those updates on social media. But the couple different things at work. There was confirmation bias. How many times have we seen that northward shift every time a storm comes into the mid-state? So I was already looking for that pattern, and once a couple of models latched onto it, even though some other ones were staying consistent with a lot of snow, I was looking for that northward shift and saw it in a couple models and just ran with it. And there's also recency bias because of how many times in the past several years we have seen that northward shift that ends up leaving particularly Metro Nashville with very little snow accumulation. Now, one of the things I could have done better was evaluating some inconsistencies among the models. This was the short-range ensemble forecast model of what the pressure was going to be like several thousand feet above the ground. I mentioned this last week that we always look for that 700 millibar low, and on the north side, so within those circles there, that bullseye in northern Alabama, on the north side of that is where you would typically find the heaviest snow accumulations. And if you just looked at that and saw, well, that's Middle Tennessee, so we should see the heaviest snow accumulations across most of the mid-state. Now, that same model's snowfall forecast was still pushing the higher snowfall amounts farther to the north, farther into Kentucky and along the Ohio River. That should have been a clue that maybe this model didn't quite have a good handle on its own version of what was going to happen, those internal inconsistencies, and that's one of the learning opportunities for meteorologists, is make sure you're aware of the internal inconsistencies within the models, make sure you're picking the right data to base a forecast on. So as we went through the day, this is what I posted again on Friday morning. By a little bit later. Once that changeover to snow happened so fast, I did adjust things a little bit, bumped up the amounts for most of the mid-state, but still, the overall pattern did rearrange itself quite a bit because of the way the storm system developed. There's a little bit of a southward jog to it, so that pushed these contours farther to the south. And that west side, where we expected cold air to wrap around with a lot more moisture, really didn't get as much snow along the Tennessee River, really hardly any snow along the Tennessee River, particularly over towards Decatur, Perry counties, down into Hardin and Wayne counties as well. And that was another way in which the storm system kind of defied our expectations. So a lot of different ways in which the forecast went sideways, where the storm moved along a little bit faster initially and then slowed down, kind of parked, and kept sending waves of moisture. We had convective snow, which is that thunder snow that added up very quickly, another complicating factor in the forecast, because the snow fell fast. There was a layer of sleet already on the ground, so that snow fell onto the sleet and was able to stick instead of falling onto warm ground, and then the first waves of snow melting. That also increased our overall accumulations. The lesson in all of this, as always, is that forecasting snow in this part of the world is very, very difficult, where you end up with a quarter inch of accumulation in some parts of the area and a foot in other parts of the area, but there are always learning opportunities, and so the next time we get one of these systems to move through, we'll put the lessons that we learned last week to work.